In today's video, I'm going to show you guys how I set up one of these. This is a 3x3 meter canvas dome tent. Now, not to worry if yours isn't exactly the same. Maybe you've got a smaller version of this or one of the lighter poly tents. You can still apply the same principles and methods to easily set it up. I'm also going to show you how to pack it up, fold it up, and get it back into the original packaging or bag that you bought your tent in. We are also going to talk about some of the tips and tricks that I've learned over the years about these types of tents. So stick around. Welcome back to the Burton Builds camping site. Let's get started. So first up, a very important tip before you leave for your camping trip. Before you leave home, it's always a good idea to check that all of the parts of your tent setup have actually been packed in. Imagine traveling hundreds of kilometers to a campsite only to find that the tent pegs or the tent poles have been left behind. That is really not going to make for a good start to a fun weekend. So to get started with the setup, I remove everything from the bag, and in my case there are 10 poles, there's a fly sheet, a rain sheet or a skull cap, there's various names given to this piece of equipment, a set of pegs, and of course the tent. I've also got a tent peg hammer to help drive pegs into the hard ground. Next up, we can go ahead and unroll the tent and start unfolding it to see where the door is. Now that we know where the door is, we can go ahead and orientate the tent so that the door is facing in the direction that we want. Now the way I like to start the setup is to orientate the tent and get it in its final position while the tent is flat. Then we can go ahead and stake all 4 corners. I'm going to start with the front corner and work my way around. Now, a little bit of a side note here, you may notice that I'm not driving the pegs in all the way to the ground. And that is because the ground where I'm setting up the tent for this video is really hard and my pegs are about 17 kilometers long. So this isn't a really good combination. Now, we'll talk more about this in the tips and tricks video, which I'll also link in the description, so make sure to go and check that out. But under normal circumstances, just set up your pegs at a 45-degree angle and drive them all the way into the ground. Once the front corner is pegged, I'll move to the back corner, pull that edge tight, and then peg the corner down. Then I can move over to the opposite back corner and pull in 2 directions so that I'm pulling against both pegs that we've already put in. Now after that, I'll move to the last corner again, pull fairly tight and peg that corner. Now when I say pull tight, what I actually mean is just pull tight enough to put a little bit of tension on the floor and to pull out any of the creases. Keep in mind here, we're not trying to stretch a 2.5 meter tent into a 3 meter tent. Now I'm going to unzip and open the door so I can walk over and grab the center of the tent and pull it forward all the way. Another tip here, generally speaking, it's not good practice to walk all over your tent, so try and avoid this as much as possible. Now I'm going to go ahead and assemble the poles. Sometimes these can be tangled depending on how well they were packed up. So just take your time and you'll eventually get everything untangled. Another tip about keeping these poles from tangling up is going to be in the tips and tricks video, so make sure you check that out. Once all the poles are together, they should form a large cross. Or another way to picture it, if you are standing at the center of the cross, there are 4 legs that go out, 1 in each direction. Each leg has 3 sections, and each of these sections easily slide into each other to eventually form a large cross. Now what usually happens when you're trying to do this by yourself is that once you've assembled all the poles into this large cross and you pick it up and try and move it into place, the joints start sliding apart and the whole thing falls apart into pieces, and this can be really frustrating. So what I'm doing here is another trick that I've figured out so that when you are doing this by yourself, you can carry the cross around and the poles don't fall apart. This I'll also include in that tips and tricks video. So once the poles are assembled, we carry the center over the central top point of the tent. Now, the center of my tent has got a tie down point, so I'll tie this to the center of the frame. Then I'll go ahead and insert both rear poles into the grommets at the back corners of the tent. After that, I can start attaching the wire clips onto the poles. Now, I prefer to attach the top 4 clips that are along the back of the tent onto each of the back poles, because once we raise the tent, they are actually quite difficult to get to. If you guys are liking the video so far, please hit the thumbs up button, and I really would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel. Also, leave us a comment, tell us about your experiences when it comes to setting up tents or maybe just camping in general. I'm also going to pull the front edge of the tent out a little bit so that I can get to those clips. I'm only going to attach one of the top clips along both of the front edges. Once we raise the tent, the rest of these front clips are actually pretty easy to get to. Now it's time to raise the tent and clip in the front two poles. Now, because I'm short, the best way that I've found to do this is to raise the center of the tent using my left hand and at the same time holding one of the front poles with my right hand, pulling it towards the center and then inserting it into the grommet. Once that's done, I'll work my way back to the center, raise it again and do the same thing with the last pole. Now I'll go ahead and continue clipping up the rest of the tent. Now I'm going to work my way around the tent, clipping all the remaining clips, starting at the top and working my way down. Another method, if you are a bit taller, is to first clip in all of the tent poles at each corner, so you've basically got a freestanding frame. Then you can go ahead and grab the center of the tent, raise it up and start clipping it on. And this can be a bit tricky, especially if you are short, so if you are wanting to do it like this, you may even consider using a small step to stand on so that you can reach the center point. Either way, both methods work pretty damn well. Now these tie down points along each side of the tent are not a convenient spot to tie down your dog. That you're going to have to find another pole for. These are additional peg points to help stop the tent from blowing away. And bro, if you think your tent is heavy and it's not going to go anywhere, don't fool yourself, this tent will blow away. Don't ask me how I know. So now I'm going to work my way around putting pegs into each of the tie down points, and keep in mind the pegs I'm using are really long and the ground is way too hard, so for this video I'm not actually driving them all the way in. When you guys set up your tent, you need to drive the pegs all the way into the ground. And in the tips and tricks video, I'll talk more about why I don't really like using these straight pegs. I prefer to use bent pegs, and more about the grey elastic rubber loops that you can see. Generally, these don't come included with your tent. And the last step is to put on the skull cap, or the rainfly, the fly sheet, whatever you want to name it, that's cool. So basically what I'm going to do is unfold the sheet and throw it over the top and center it as best as possible. Each of the legs on the skull cap has a buckle, a strap and a wire clip, and this gets clipped into the grommet at each corner of the tent. Now, once all four corners are clipped, you may need to work your way around once again and adjust each of the straps so that the cap is pulled fairly tight over the top. There are also other setups similar to this. Some of them have got a porch or a veranda. The setup is pretty much the same, although you might just have to set up an additional 2 poles with some guy ropes, but not to worry, it's also very easy to do. So there we go, it is as simple as that, and it only took me 15 minutes to erect my own tent by myself. Now, of course, it does go a lot quicker and it's a lot more fun pitching a tent with 2 people. However, as you can see, it is possible to pitch quite a large tent by yourself. Now, the little tips and tricks that go with this, specific to do with the pegs, the rubber bands that go along the side of the tent, how do we clip the poles together without them falling apart and you're trying to carry it, how do we pitch such a tall tent when you're a short shit like me, all of those little tips and tricks we're going to talk about in another video which is already out. I will link it in the description, go and check it out. Here's another question, how do you take this tent down, how do you fold it up and get it back into that little bag? If you guys are interested in that, go check out this video right here. Thank you very much for watching and we'll see you there. Cheers.